What's up, boys?
Yo,
What's going down? We're back
cooking.
with another Packet Live Community Roundtable Wednesday, always on a Wednesday. However, today is May 28th at 9 o'clock Pacific Standard Time. It's great to be here with you guys. We got Caleb James Delisle, the man, the myth, the legend. We got Jesse Berger, Josh Berger, myself, Jeremy Berger. How are you guys doing?
Doing pretty well.
Yeah. Feeling good, feeling great, ready to talk packet and crypto and all the good stuff that's been going on in the background.
Indeed. Well, obviously the Bitcoin 2025 show is going down in Vegas right now.
Oh yeah.
A lot of action. First time, I think the first time ever that a Bitcoin show's going on with $100,000+ Bitcoin. So that's probably pretty exciting. We're definitely we're unfortunately not there for the first time in
7 years. First time in 7 years, yeah.
7 years.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a trip.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Bitcoin went off a cliff this morning. I mean, not too bad of a cliff, but it's 107 from 110.
Yeah, it's been jumping around by $1,000 to $2,000 every day, but I mean,
seems pretty standard.
Yeah, it's 1% here up and down.
But it's the first time it's in Las Vegas, which I remember back in the day when we'd go to Vegas for a World Crypto Con. That was legendary moment. 2018.
Didn't Caleb go on that? Wasn't that the Vegas trip that you went on, Caleb?
Yeah. I went to something in Vegas.
We went to Coin Agenda.
Yeah, remember that.
But yeah, I think they were both happening around the same time. And
well, next year we'll be there.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Next year we'll be.
I'm just sharing our live with everybody right now.
Nice.
So,
yeah. Well, some interesting updates for sure. I mean, it's we got Ethereum just pounding the door at $27,100, and I think once Ethereum definitively breaks above 27, we're going to see a pretty good run up. That'll be a number. And obviously Bitcoin holding strong above 100 for almost going on 2 weeks now. So, or somewhere in that ballpark. So it's pretty impressive pump. I mean, people like to get excited about it. All it really means is that the US dollar is weakening, and people are piling into Bitcoin. So we're starting to see it decouple a bit from traditional market. What's that, Caleb?
Well, this is a funny topic because how do you define dollar weakness or dollar strength? I mean, you can only say it's weak if everything is priced higher versus the dollar, right? Obviously the yen is weaker than the dollar. But if an asset like Bitcoin goes up, that doesn't necessarily, because it's more like you could just get a whole bunch of people piling into it for one reason or another. And then the asset starts to bubble and it goes up on it because people are buying it.
Sure.
But dollar weakness is definitely a thing. And I think a lot of it was because the government stopped spending money or slowed down the spending of money. And then that gave the Federal Reserve an opportunity to expand some QE, do some additional QE, which inflation theoretically came down a bit, and then the Fed comes in and does some QE, so that brings in some new dollar weakness, so assets go up. But then the other side of it, you got gold, and gold is going up too, but it's not doing what Bitcoin's doing. And my instinct right now about gold is that one of the reasons why it doesn't perform that well is because a lot of the countries which hold gold, and this is also my instinct about Bitcoin. Bitcoin does well, whereas gold does not so well, because gold is held majority by the U.S. supposedly, if Fort Knox is real, but majorly held by countries the U.S. doesn't really like that much. So it's in the interest of the U.S. system or the U.S. government or whatever to kind of pump Bitcoin a little bit. And you've seen that the system has adopted Bitcoin. Like, what was it, 5 years ago? The system didn't like Bitcoin. Bitcoin was on the outside. It was a climate change disaster, yada yada yada. And then all of a sudden, the system decided, okay, we're good with Bitcoin, and all the climate change stuff went away, and everybody started saying, okay, Bitcoin is cool. Now, and that actually coincided with China banning Bitcoin. So China stopped doing Bitcoin, and the U.S. picked it up, and that was like 5 years ago. Now I have a kind of hypothesis that a lot of the interest in Bitcoin, like institutional interest, comes from the fact that it has a lot of the properties of gold, but unlike gold, it's not being held by these countries like Russia and China, which the U.S. doesn't really like. So pumping Bitcoin is a way to fake gold. And pumping Bitcoin as an alternative to gold is a way to fake gold. And what they want is for gold to not go up. So they want to create an alternative store of wealth other than gold. And so that's why they're kind of like making Bitcoin into gold 2.0, so that people will hold Bitcoin rather than holding gold. Gold won't go up so much, and countries like Russia and China will not be benefactors of that.
Yeah, that's probably a good theory.
Russia and China were like the biggest miners of Bitcoin back in the day. I mean, I remember when they shut down, when China said, all right, no more Bitcoin mining, that like they were the biggest miners of Bitcoin back in the day. So and we know that China you can't have a company in China unless the government owns you, more or less. So it's an interesting theory to say that China and Russia don't have Bitcoin, when we also know that Russia just got sanctioned, and they moved everything to a Bitcoin transaction and cryptocurrency. So I don't know if that theory holds.
Yeah, no, that's a good point about the dark transactions going on using Bitcoin. Now, the thing about Bitcoin versus gold is like, it's just that the numbers are so far different. Like they have like a few $100 billion worth of gold, which is just a lot of gold in just Russia alone. China is even more. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that the interest, I mean, if Bitcoin weren't interested in some militaristic way, like the West would just say, yeah, we're not interested, and it's not cool. It's an environmental disaster. Don't do it, which is what they did in like 2021. If so, there's some reason why they find it interesting. I mean, there's the Soft War book by Jason P. Lowery, where he argues that it represents war in the cyberspace realm. But there's definitely something, and I mean that's my pet hypothesis for what it's worth.
Yeah, look, there's certainly value, I think, long term for the Bitcoin story, and there's a couple basic party lines, for example, that if you look at how much Bitcoin is lost, even at 21 million Bitcoins, there's not enough Bitcoin for every millionaire to have one. So, that just being like one piece of it. And then knowing that there's, groups that have acquired, tens of billions of dollars worth of Bitcoin. So that even makes it more difficult for people to get their hands on it. There's a scarcity issue. And I think the transactability of Bitcoin, I mean, there's not a lot of there's no other ability out there for transacting large amounts of value in a seamless, way than Bitcoin. I mean, these stories are strong use cases for Bitcoin in general. So I don't see it stopping anytime soon. There will always be short-term volatility. There will also be people, that are leveraging it, and there will be liquidations, probably perpetually on that, and you'll continue to see these exchanges, gladly just raking in the hundreds of millions from people treating crypto trading like a casino. So that's I don't see how that is going to be ever regulated. Maybe in certain countries, but on a global basis, it seems like the casino effect for cryptocurrency and Bitcoin is going to continue, perpetually at this point, at very least. But yeah, from a store of value standpoint, and I think the value story is just around the ability to move large amounts of value, without any third party, without any centralized intermediary. Those are, especially on a nation state basis, very strong use cases for crypto, and in particular Bitcoin. So I think, I think that there's the idea of owning a little bit of it at the very least, and as much as you can at the very best, is a good use case. I actually been using this analogy that I quite like, which is if you go back, let's say 50-ish years, the decision that one generation back, so our parents would have made about buying real estate, is the similar decision that people nowadays can make about buying Bitcoin. It's like you could buy a house for 50,000 or 100,000 or $200,000 50 years ago in prime locations, by the beach, and those houses are all now worth $1 million. So anywhere between 500,000 and several million. Like if you were to have been fortunate enough to buy, in South Beach or something like that, these houses are worth even more, right? And so that decision to buy a Bitcoin at 100,000 today is it just, maybe not equivalent to, but I'm in the general sense equivalent to the decision that our parents' generation would have made to buy real estate. And I think that will probably play out accordingly when we look back, 10, 20, 30 years from now. I think it's a foregone conclusion that we're going to see Bitcoin with an X multiple from where it is today. So, I think a lot of people are still going to say, I don't understand it, or, whatever these kind of pedantic arguments may be about why you wouldn't do it or has no value. I had one financial advisor tell my parents that there's, quote, nothing backing Bitcoin, and they should sell off all the Bitcoin they have to pay off or any Bitcoin they have to pay off an 8% car loan, that they,
Well,
and I was like, wait a minute, what, Bitcoin, if you look at the growth of Bitcoin over the last 12 months, and you look at the, interest accrual on your, couple $1,000 car loan, no, you would not take your most high yielding asset to sell it off to pay off your lowest, cost liability. That's just like absolute stupidity. But that's a financial advisor, like an actual financial advisor that's giving that advice to, the boomer generation. So that's the idiocy that's out there right now. Advising, and those dinosaurs need to, go extinct, and we will see a new era of understanding in digital currency for sure. So we're still in this little moment in time where Bitcoin's still young enough, and legacy market understanding is still ingrained enough that people are subjected to misinformation, or just pure ignorance, getting exposed to pure ignorance, and most likely missing the boat. And I remember, getting my dad to buy Bitcoin at the all-time high in the last market cycle at around 50 plus $1,000. He bought some at 50, 55. And then when it went down, I encouraged him to just continue to buy. And he bought it all the way down to, 16,000 where it bottomed out. And I remember him telling me, he's like, why am I buying Bitcoin at the top? And I was like, this ain't going to be the top. And his top investment's now 2x. His bottom investment is 10x, right? Or almost there about. And so, and there's absolutely nothing else in his, retirement or anything like that that got anywhere close to that, right? So these are, and I think there's still a case that, it's safe to buy. I mean, we might see a market capitulation, but, long term, even if you're buying Bitcoin at 100,000, you're gonna. I think it's safe to say that you'll be in the profit. I think we're at a point right now. I saw something that somewhere like 95 or 96+% of all Bitcoin holders are in profit right now. It might even be higher than that.
Did you see that GameStop just bought 4,710 Bitcoins worth over $500 million?
Yeah, I just saw that press release come out just now. But
Well,
yeah, and you're
somebody thinks
seeing a lot of treasury. Yeah.
Bitcoin is owned by nothing. It's backed by nothing. Then they can buy GameStop because it's backed by a corporate entity.
Well, that's the funny thing. That's the
There you
argument.
go.
It's like, what are stocks even backed by? Just a company giving you updates on what they're doing and what they're not doing, and their reports, if they're doing good or doing not good. And what are those reports? Those are just people making those things up based off sales, and those can be fluffed. We know that, right?
Manipulated.
So,
for sure.
yeah, it's just funny that people will have the argument that Bitcoin's not backed by anything. It's like, well, what's gold backed by?
Just how much someone's willing to pay for it.
How much somebody's willing to pay for a gold bar or a gold chain or friggin' gold earrings. Bitcoin is backed by the same kind of ideology where it's like, it's worth what people are willing to pay,
True. I actually think Bitcoin's even backed more dynamically than anything else because of the global market effect and because its price is being derived. I mean, of course, can it be manipulated? Are there whales that can move large amounts of Bitcoin to either dump the market or pump the market? For sure. I mean, that market effect exists on almost every single market where, anything, especially a commodity market, is going to be impacted by supply and demand. There's always going to be certain parties that have large quantities of a commodity that could, constrain its supply, or dump its supply, and those will have, that will have market effects. We've seen this on oil. We've seen this on, soybeans. You see this on Bitcoin, and so that dynamic always exists, for example. But there's also, as a virtue of those dynamics, opportunities where you can dollar cost average into an asset. I mean, dollar cost averaging into soybeans when you have a perishable, for example, or you're buying futures is different. But, when you're talking about Bitcoin in particular, depending on your purpose, but, what we're seeing is people, A, accumulating treasury, B, now to your point, Jeremy, you're seeing companies putting Bitcoin on their balance sheet, because then even with a financial report and revenue, you can then back your company's securities, your stock, with basically a treasury, in the case of Bitcoin. So you can actually have that, it's like a digital treasury, so to speak. And that's compelling because, and I also have this argument that Bitcoin, and I would love for someone to even debate this. I don't think it's debatable, but Bitcoin is the most liquid asset in the entire world. It's because of the digital nature of it. There's nobody, you can liquidate your Bitcoin instantaneously on a global basis. Anywhere in the world, you can liquidate Bitcoin. I mean, of course, you have to have access to the internet, but there's no other asset that's as liquid as, like even cash isn't as liquid as Bitcoin, because if I have $1 million in cash, you can't you can't even deposit that at a bank. You can't even walk into a bank with $1 million cash and deposit it. And you certainly couldn't transfer $1 million in cash to a counterparty outside of just being in the actual, 5-foot radius of another individual. So that's not very liquid. And carrying around $1 million in cash isn't very efficient either. But carrying
You
around $1
can't
million
even
in Bitcoin.
You can't
It's
even
easy.
go to a bank, even if you had $1 million in your bank account, and say you want to move it without there being a lot of questions. Didn't you hear
You
about
couldn't
that one
even
guy?
if you had if you had $1 million in your bank account, you couldn't go into the bank and withdraw it. They won't even give it to you, right? So
No, you couldn't even withdraw $100,000 in cash.
yeah, you can't even draw 10,000 even. I mean, it's difficult, but in many banks and in most countries. So in America, maybe a little bit easier to withdraw,
I don't
something like
know.
10,000, but still difficult. They actually recommend that you need to notify them in advance
You
for
have
them
to
to have the
actually
cash on
fill out
hand.
a report if you pull out more than $10,000 and report it to the IRS.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, you're supposed to do that in STR, even if you're transferring 10,000, Coinbase, if you move $10,000 with the Bitcoin, Coinbase will put a report out on that. But and put those notices out there. But the point is, from just a liquid basis, Bitcoin is the most liquid asset in the world. That's my opinion. I haven't heard anyone else like really tote that, but I'm sure other people have said it. But I'm just saying, I don't think there's anything else that's as liquid and transferable, and where you'll have more potential counterparties that will willingly just take it off your hands. Like if you were desperate for money and you were just like, hey, I got, X number of dollars worth of Bitcoin. I just need someone to give me cash for it right now. I don't think you would have to stray very far to find
I
that, let
wonder what
alone,
I
be
wonder
able
what
to
the
do a
fee is.
transaction.
I wonder what the
But
fee would be to transfer like to sell $1 million in Bitcoin on Coinbase, and then do the transfer of the auto transfer directly into
yeah, so that's the one thing I will say. So getting cash from getting Bitcoin to turn into cash and get it deposited in your bank account. And if you were using Coinbase, for example, yeah, you'd either pay a lot of fees or maybe they would put a halt on that type of transaction just because they are, regulated by the US. And maybe like a large transaction, would have some friction just because if you were trying to get cash, you need a counterparty and they'd be like, what are you doing with, $10 billion worth of Bitcoin and trying to cash it out? But yeah, there still would be liquidity, and there's certainly ways to get, there. You might have to break it up and disperse it out. And, you're still looking for a counterparty who has a lot of cash. The point being, it's very liquid. And so I think that we'll see this story around Bitcoin. Like I said, once this next generation, like let's say you go 20 years out, because 20 years out, you're pretty much going to have, I think it's something like 80% of the boomer generation, 80 to 90% of the boomer generation will be deceased at that point. And that generation is relatively struggles a bit with tech, right? So once the next generation, which will be the millennials, are the pervading adults in the room, who grew up with cell phones, at the very least, like went to college with cell phones, but at the very best went through high school with cell phones, like digital first citizens are going to be a lot more comfortable with Bitcoin, and those will be the next legislators. Those will be the next, people that, kind of global citizens having children that will educate, their children to understand the value of digital currency. So,
The way I analyze the valuation or the future value of Bitcoin is basically I just say, well, if nothing works in the long term, like central banks and governments and any idea of a world currency all just falls apart because humans are humans.
mhm.
And if crypto remains a greasy pole that it's really, really hard to get up to the top, and you can't, even Ethereum has a really hard time trying to climb to the place where Bitcoin is, and
Yeah.
Bitcoin just has the first mover advantage. And as long as the internet stays, which is probably a pretty safe bet, then we can pretty much bet that Bitcoin's going to be the medium of exchange, because gold is a pain in the butt to move around. And when you give it to somebody, they don't know that you're not giving them fool's gold. So they have to melt it down and do all this stuff that's incredibly expensive, that just makes gold not very useful. So, I mean, as long as people keep being people, we can kind of expect that Bitcoin's going to keep being useful.
Yeah, I think that's fair, and I just think that, yeah, it's a foregone conclusion at this point. So it's like not getting on the train. I mean, you should have been on the train last year. I actually found a Facebook post or a Instagram post that I had put out that that showed the chart of Bitcoin, and it said, "Hey, I told you to buy Bitcoin at 20. Now it's at 45,000, and it's still a good buy." And, it's load up like right here, 45,000. I mean, who knows? I don't have a lot of followers or anything, but it was like, notifying everyone. Now we're well over 200% off of that post, and it wasn't. I think it was right around the Bitcoin ETF. Um, Still either had just happened or was just about to happen. So, but there will be other global events that are going to put more emphasis on Bitcoin. I actually just saw something around the Trump media company issuing stock or selling off stock to buy $2.5 billion worth of cryptocurrencies, predominantly Bitcoin. And you're just going to see a lot more companies putting Bitcoin on the balance sheet. It's just going to continue to happen. Which, if you're putting, what is it, 4,000 Bitcoins, Jer? Is it roughly 4,000 Bitcoins for 500 million bucks? That
It was 4,700, I think.
Got it. So
that's a snowball effect too, because those companies, like, then they will lobby for Bitcoin friendly legislation just
Right.
because they have it on their balance sheet, Trump especially.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, look, it's a sea change. So it's like, get on board. There's no point. I just couldn't believe actually getting in a fight with my with family member over this stuff. And it's just, there's just still resistance, around it. So I think it's just a little bit of FOMO that they didn't listen to us, that they could have put, a little money in at 40 or 50 grand and doubled their money. And then now they're talking about how it's not, backed by anything, not understanding that
Well,
they can
yeah,
argue anything's not backed by anything.
Yeah, real quick for everybody that's listening, if you can like and retweet this live stream so that we can push this out far and wide, it'd be extremely helpful.
Indeed.
Yeah, we appreciate everybody tuning in, and yeah, we'll keep the conversation rolling.
Yeah, so we could talk a little on Packet, obviously. That's why we're all here. And we had actually a cool talk yesterday with influencer. I don't know, would you call him an influencer? Influencer, marketer, KOL. Who's really excited about getting involved with the marketing conversation with Packet. We talked specifically about them potentially becoming the network steward, and some ideas where I think it will be a longer conversation. But yeah, just some ideas about getting some new, some new activity in terms of, getting out there and promoting. The conversation around Packet TV is really taking shape, and Josh and I are working on that every single day, putting together a business plan, financial model, everything for Packet TV to really have a shot at becoming a competitive streaming platform. As far as its accessibility on a global basis, you're going to have content licensing that is going to be most likely limited to certain Western countries. Like there will be some limit, geo limitations with content. Matter of fact, and then the other, not just necessarily the geo limitations of the content, but actually the technological limitations of certain areas around the world that just don't have good streaming services, as it relates to either CDN, or even the technology on the user side, like just having like older cellular devices. So there will be some potential limitations. We haven't gotten that far yet because the Packet TV platform really, it's not going to launch until 2026. But the story and like all the build and the marketing and everything that's going to lead towards its launch would begin sometime around the fall this year. And and a lot of the marketing and publicity will really begin to take off upon the fundraise, the completion of that fundraise, which will be substantial to the effect that we intend for. Well, obviously the backbone of the Packet network is powering Packet TV, but we intend for there to be synergistic marketing between what's happening in the traditional media space as well as what's happening and really where the foundation is Packet, in the crypto space. And really what gets me excited about it is the real world use case for the network. Now, of course, Packet's not a CDN. That was never the intent for it. But there are other CDN projects in the crypto sphere. And so as Packet TV substantiates itself, and I think we said this before, the intent is absolutely to align with other crypto CDNs and really begin showing the general use case for these crypto projects in real world utility. So I'm very passionate about that and actually executing on that, because there's no one else who's done anything of substance and of size specifically in the media space. Maybe there's other projects that are using some of these infrastructures for for what their use are. But in the case of Packet TV, I really think that has a shot to make a splash, both with celebrity driven content, brand driven content, and be a competitive platform that people can use for watching free ad supported television. And yeah, an example use case, actually, I was at an Airbnb over the weekend, and I turned on the TV. It was a smart TV, and the smart TV was loaded up with apps. Actually, and so when you load up the TV, it has all the different apps on it, but a lot of those apps are what's called SVOD, streaming video on demand. With streaming video on demand, it requires a subscription. So, for example, Amazon Prime, Hulu, HBO Max, Netflix. These are all, even ESPN, requires a subscription. And so then you're in an Airbnb putting in your email address or logging into your account. And ultimately, like, you want to make sure you log out of that account when you leave, because you don't want someone else at the Airbnb to be using your Netflix account, for example. But also, one of the apps on the television was Tubi. And Tubi is a free ad supported streaming network. And so I was able to watch Tubi. It doesn't require any subscription. And there's tons of content on it, tons of movies, tons of live television, a bunch of, streaming TV with, it's ad supported. And it was pretty cool to just realize that even if I don't want to type in my email address, I could just find a whole slew of content. There's still a gap there where a lot of people are not familiar with free ad supported streaming television, aren't thinking first about, hey, when I'm in an Airbnb or when I'm in a hotel, I'm going to put on Tubi or Pluto TV and just watch television for free. And yeah, it has ads, but that's familiar. If you're watching cable in a hotel, it has ads as well, so it's not unfamiliar. And so that's really the world, the business that we're thrusting Packet into, the use case where this network can really be used. And it also provides a benefit for rights holders who control this content looking for distribution. Packet TV will be able to provide that, facilitate payments to rights holders and content creators, and creating these unique channels that are really, really interesting on the content side for a consumer looking for, anything ranging from sports to movies to, scripted and unscripted television, sitcoms to, cooking channel or, home and health and whatever else you're interested in, even music. So just building a big content network that people can just use, right? It's not even about it being, crypto centric or it's, that's all on the infrastructure side. It's really just like a use case for this network in particular. And yeah, it gets me excited to kind of finally get up from doing the infrastructure stuff that we've been doing for the last 6 years to finally getting into the utility stuff where it's like someone can literally just be watching Packet TV and they don't have to think about a crypto wallet. They don't have to think about anything. They're just able to consume content on a global basis.
Yeah, totally. And also really helping people have a better experience, If we can
Yeah.
really improve people's content viewing experience, then that's a big win. And, every single person can relate to flipping through channels or flipping through platforms and trying to figure out what to watch and then just saying, never mind, I'm just going to go to bed.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's a common viewing experience with this overload in content that we have, and an inability to discover new stuff. And you're either watching a trailer for a second and seeing if it is interesting, or you're looking at a logo or a cover art and you're seeing if it's interesting. And then I was actually, we were watching Netflix last night and I was shocked by the quality of content on there. It was pretty low. It seems like they're just painting by numbers and kind of, there's this quote, I actually forget who said it, but it's like, the executives who are making the decisions for filmmakers have never made a film in their life. So they're making these decisions based off of data and information that they're given, but have no idea what it's even like to make a piece of content. And so those are the ones that are programming what we consume. And
Yeah.
especially on Netflix, where it seems very methodical, and you can I just see that they're just literally green lighting based on data as
Yeah.
opposed to real creators and real stories and things that are impactful and meaningful and entertaining, and you're just looking at the slew of content. And don't get me wrong, Netflix is Netflix, and I'm not here to shit on Netflix. They're a monster in the industry and obviously doing something well because they're massive. But we're certainly losing a piece of this industry when everything's kind of paint by numbers. And if we're able to use AI and machine learning to help curate channels that are made for you based on your interests and your preferences, then that and help you discover new stuff that's based on old stuff or based on mood or categories, then that becomes really exciting and a huge value add to society as a whole from content consumers.
Yeah, look, I it's still there's still a lot of risk there because you know, it's very subjective whether a show is good or bad or a movie is good or bad. Like some person could love it, some person can hate it. So I don't think that will necessarily change. And yeah, you're right that there's a lot of people put into the decision making or gatekeeping roles within these organizations that have never been on set or gone to uh, any type of or had any type of creative experience making this type of content, but that doesn't necessarily qualify you to do programming. Like you're trying to tap into the zeitgeist of the audience and create content. And you are right though, paint by numbers is more like, hey, we know that this actor is drawing in this type of audience and We can get this type of viewership on this type of genre. So if we make it for this budget, and it's this genre and these actors, then we should be able to get this many viewers, and they can do the math and figure out how to deploy their content budget to, deliver on their mandate to get, more subscribers and retain subscribers, and, just all the things that, they need to do on a mass level to grow their viewership, well over, heading over the 300 million subscribers. It's far and away the most dominant, SVOD platform in the entire world. And they're creating content regionally that's specific for those different communities and those audiences. So it's obviously a huge machine, creating billions of dollars worth of content. And I mean, you can look at the success of Netflix just on its reflected on its stock price. I was saying this the other day. If you add up every traditional movie studio market cap and multiply it times 3 or 4, it will still be less than the market cap of Netflix. Like, Netflix is the dominant player, but there is a problem around content discovery. And this is a significant problem. And it's not to say that the content's all bad out there. It's just hard to find what to watch. It's like also hard to tap into your own mood. Do you want to watch a documentary? Do you want to watch some scripted? Do you want to watch an old movie? Do you want to watch a new movie? If you're picking out a new movie, how are you picking it? Is it genre based? Is it actor based? Is it, budget based? What is the thing that helps you make these decisions? And oftentimes we don't even know. And so we get kind of this selection paralysis where we're just flipping through apps or flipping through content, one sheets, or watching trailers, just trying to find something to watch. And you spend 6 to 12 minutes on average looking for something to watch. And sometimes people just like give up, or they'll finally select something and watch 10 minutes of it and be like, this sucks, or just want to go sleep. And that's not a great experience. And so one of the things we wanted to tackle with Packet TV was the discovery problem. Now, it doesn't mean we're going to like be the panacea of fixing the discovery problem, most likely not, but to give yourself a chip shot into discovery, I think it's at least approaching it and trying to bring a semblance of resolve to that. And interestingly, this is a really interesting little factoid, but a lot of people use Spotify. I don't know the exact numbers, but generally speaking, it's ubiquitous. Like, a lot of people have it. They have a free version of it, and if you have a subscribed version of it, you don't have to listen to ads. And a lot of people subscribe to it and probably don't use it as much as they could or should. But the interesting thing about Spotify is that and I think the Spotify UI is pretty awful, to be honest. I'm just shockingly disappointed that they haven't really upgraded and their homepage, way that functions. But if you do have Spotify and you scroll down to about, like, let's say, 1.5 screens down from like the main screen, you'll see it say made for you playlists. You'll see the words made for you in several different headlines, for sections. And that's understanding the artists that you listen to and then creating essentially like a playlist or a radio station type um, playlist that includes a bunch of artists and songs and music that it thinks that you may like. And if you listen to those made for you channels, you're going to find new artists, new music that you've never listened to that you're going to like. That's a fact. Now, it doesn't mean that you'll love everything. No, obviously not. But you'll find a couple songs where you're like, dang, this is great. And you're going to like it, save it. Maybe it goes into one of your playlists that you listen to more regularly. And you'll be surprised from a discovery standpoint that Spotify does a pretty good job about this. And Netflix, one of the successes of Netflix is how they curate your home screen. Everyone has their own unique home screen. It analyzes your viewing habits and, the genres that you like, the things that you thumbs up, things that you put in your watch list, the things that you watch and don't finish, the things that you watch and do finish. And it starts to analyze that, and it's serving up like your top 10 is going to be unique to you. And, the things that it recommends, the recommendation engine is going to be unique to your personal algorithm. And that's been really successful for them. Not only that, but they may serve you up a movie that you don't click on, and then they'll change the one sheet multiple times with different actors, different colors and different font shapes and sizes, just to try and get you, to click on it, right? And they've had a lot of success helping audiences find what to watch. But this doesn't exist on every single platform. And so with FAST, free ad supporting television, which has got a lot of different channels that have a lot of different content, there's really no one doing things around the discovery space. It's just like channels. There's all this programming, this linear programming, meaning like this show, then this show at 7, this show at 8, this show at 9, etc. But if you just land on that channel, unless you're flipping through the guide and just reading what's coming up next, like it's really hard to interact with. And so there's a big opportunity to improve that experience. And so that's really our focus with Packet TV, is to tackle the discovery problem. And so it'll give us a story to tell, and it'll give us an opportunity to bring a lot of creators into the fold. And the other thing that Made for You television does is that, let's say that you have, as a content creator, your content on the channel, and that channel is maybe not like the most popular channel because no one's ever heard of that channel name, or it's a new channel or whatever, but your content's there. How's anybody ever going to discover that piece of content? It's just like the luck of the draw that someone lands on it and watches long enough until your content comes into view. Like, that's pretty presumptuous. And a lot of channels fail in the fast streaming space because like they just don't get adoption. Well, that's silly, because like now you're basing, it could have incredible content, just nobody discovers it, and then you're just going to want to cancel that channel because it's low performing, even though it has great content. So using AI, machine learning, and these this curation tool around discovery to feed content into people's feeds based on metadata into their Made for You channels so that they could have a shot of discovering it is really, really smart. And at that point, a lot more content can get discovery. A lot of content creators can monetize their content in ways that they wouldn't have been able to before, because they're just like sitting on a channel that nobody's watching, and ultimately getting zero viewership doesn't help anybody. So really excited to use this technology to stir the pot. Our recommendation engines, like, anything that's groundbreaking for AI and what's happening in the AI space. No, it's pretty much like a low rung in terms of what AI is capable of, but it's really not being used in this way. And I think it should be, and it's certainly the main story point for what Packet TV would be. So we're just building a coalition of advisors, investors, and content creators and programmers to help build Packet TV into this vision. And it will just sit alongside a lot of these other major incumbent platforms like Amazon Prime and Sling TV, and these major players in the fast streaming space, and offer a new lane for content creators to be discovered.
Yeah. You're muted, Jeremy.
I was just saying, I'm super excited for the ability for content creators to to get their fair share. It's been too long where they've been taken advantage of and haven't been able to really reap the benefits of, their creations.
Yeah.
Maybe they get a upfront kind of reward, but, upon success, they don't get to see the true rewards that come from, successful content. And I've had that happen to me. I mean, I put out a song, and, early on in my career of being a DJ and music producer, and the song went on to generate over 50 million streams on YouTube and on Spotify. And I don't get a participation on Spotify, and I split and the label takes 50% of oh, sorry. I don't get a share of YouTube. Label gets 50% of the share on Spotify, and then the 4 artists split the remaining 50%. It's like, there's been a lot of money, probably close to $50,000-$60,000 in revenue off the song, and maybe probably more than that. and I probably received $2,000.
Wow. So most of the money goes to the label and to the
Yeah.
platform.
Yeah, the label. So the label, basically they sign the song, exclude you from YouTube, because back in the day, you know, this is, you know, 12 years ago, maybe not that long ago, or not 12 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, 9 or 10 years ago. And basically what they do is they'll sign the song and then use their engine to promote it. And so what they're saying, because we're using our engine to promote it, you're getting, you know, exposure. And so you only get to participate on the Spotify side, and YouTube, because their channel was so big on YouTube, they took 100%. And back then, who knew that the song would, you know, go to the height of where it is today? If I had uploaded it on my own channel and gotten the, you know, 20 million views on YouTube, it would have been a whole different story. So I think that it's time for creators, not just in music, but film and, you know, art and things like that, for people to get in books. You know, books are huge right now. You go sign your book to a publisher, they'll give you probably an upfront advance, and then publisher has to recoup, and who knows how much money they actually spend on releasing a book, you know, between marketing and, you know, just the printing costs and things like that. You'll probably never see $1 unless it has, you know, viral success, like on Book Talk or something like that. So having a platform where people can, you know, and I'm referring more to the Creator Hub, less about Packet TV.
Yeah.
But I think that's going to be, the way I look at it, I get really excited for the hub, but also, you know, then Packet TV being a place for, you know, filmmakers and to be able to have a place for their content to live and be remunerated for their hard work.
Yeah, you know, we didn't talk about Packet Hub, and maybe we'll talk about that on our next call. But yeah, there's some really interesting things and opportunities there with Packet Hub. There's some tech that Josh has been developing with Packet Hub, just to make it more accessible, and so that we can get content loaded up there more easily. We also just did a call yesterday where we demoed out some technology with a provider to enable people to self-distribute content, and on a global basis, and get paid directly from the consumer. And now it does have some intermediary fees, like just some platform fees that this tech costs, but it's pretty nominal. It's a small tax. Just call it a platform fee or transaction fee that is included. But what's great about the tech is it not only allows you to upload and gate the content as needed, but it includes a royalty share, like where you can enter in, like, this person gets 10%, this person gets 5%, etc., right there on the back end. So when you upload the content, every dollar that's made, it will just automatically distribute it to everybody in real time. So that's pretty cool. So, like, for example, if you have, you know, I know that you're splitting up royalties on music, people split royalties. You can have, you know, on movies, a lot of different people. You can split the order and the hierarchy of how it all functions. But that was really, really cool to see. And that was something that Josh and I have been talking about wanting with Packet Hub, to enable people to get content up there and distribute direct. Right now, the way Packet Hub works is, if your content's being represented somewhere on the internet, so let's say you have like an Amazon location to purchase, or the movie's up on Netflix, or, you know, if it's up on iTunes or something, you can just link directly from your Packet Hub page, and it will just take you to that place to do a transaction. But our goal was for you to click from the tile to a sub page, and on the sub page you can have people transact direct with you, and you're just keeping the money. And that's incredibly powerful, because it's basically Apple TV without paying, or sorry, iTunes without paying 30% to Apple, and getting a 30% plus up. Like, especially if you're doing the promotion, what do you need Apple for? Just to provide you with a transactional platform? They're not promoting your content. They're just facilitating the sale of your content, and taking 30% 5%. Amazon, in some instances, takes 50% of the transaction. Plus, they charge you a bunch of additional fees that come off the top. So it ends up being like 60% or more. And when you're a creator who's maybe only doing 10, 20, $50,000 in revenue, 30% is a huge number to lose off the top. Like 30%, it's like, for what? Just for them giving you a way to sell? So that's a ripoff. And what a lot of people will say is, but it's Apple and they have 1 billion customers and 1 billion credit cards and it's the best way for discovery. No, it's not the best way for discovery. Like, you should be marketing your own content. You could be having someone for a fraction of that 30% fee driving transactional business off of Meta, and you'll get a lot higher conversion rate. But most people are just lazy. Most content creators, and I hate even calling them lazy because they work their butts off, but what happens is they don't like doing the distribution side. So we profess like we're artists, we don't know how to do distribution, so we should give it to Netflix or we should give it to Amazon and let them do what they do best and make me money. But they're just selling widgets. Like, they don't care about your content. They're just building a large library and using algorithms to try and get people to transact. And so if you can certainly do it better than Amazon. There's no question about it. You just have to do the work, and most people don't want to. And it's not, lazy is the wrong word. It's just like professing that, hey, I'm not an expert in it. I want to let someone else do it. I'm willing to pay a huge amount of money. I also think that there's this kind of misconception that around prestige, which is like, oh, I got distributed. I'm available on Apple, iTunes. It's like, oh, that's great, amazing, congratulations. But it's not congratulations. It's like, oh, I'm sorry to hear that, because a huge percentage of your revenue is now going to a Fortune 500 $1 trillion company, and like, you're just going to end up with very little, if any, money off of that, and they're going to take all that money off the top of gross. So there needs to be alternatives. People are scared of alternatives. People are scared of doing the work to market their own product.
Well, I
But
think that
we want to
I think
empower
people are
people.
scared about it because they don't have the tools.
Yeah.
It's like, and or the money, and so the that's always makes things difficult, is not knowing where to go and how to, like, what, if there was a platform that said, okay, here's we're gonna show you the steps on how to do it.
Yeah.
And
So true.
and like, gave people a tutorial on like what needed, like how to do it yourself. And a platform that, like, for example, like, if you were to tell me, how do you distribute music, I'd be like, I have no idea. However, I know a couple websites that you can do it and pay $9, and it will upload your content to every single streaming platform on the planet. Okay, well, and then I get to keep 100% of the revenue.
Right.
That's a good deal,
Yeah.
And especially if you already have a platform, like you're an influencer or a celebrity, it's like you would take that deal because the reach of your platform is going to be far greater if you have the tools to put it out there. So I think that just being able to have that type of tools at hand will be beneficial to content creators.
Yeah, it's just you have to break through, and like I said, I think a lot of people are just afraid, or kind of profess ignorance. They're like, oh, I'm just not good at that. I think the biggest problem, and it's not, maybe not the biggest, but it's one of the top 5 biggest problems, is that, let's say you're an artist making music or an artist making movies. Well, you put your effort into the creative side. You'll do all-nighters, doing all the creative. You'll maybe rent studio space or rent cameras, or you go push yourself into doing all the creative stuff, right? And you get it in the can, you get the recording completed, you get the movie, made and edited, and then you're out of money. Or you're just like, hey, that's all the money that you raised. What's that?
Or you're fatigued.
Right. Or you're fatigued. You've been making a movie for 2 years, or you've been making music, for months and months and months. And you're just like, hey, I'm done. I'm ready for someone else to take this and make it famous. but you have no more budget for the marketing.
Right.
And sometimes like to release a song successfully could be like $2,000-3,000, and that could be the difference between the song making $50,000 and making $500. Or with a movie, you're just looking for somebody to sell it for you, or someone to distribute it for you, but you have no money to even make a trailer or to make a one sheet so that you can even give them the tools to sell it for you. You need someone to do all that. So now you're running around being like, hey, here's my flash drive, do you want to watch this movie? And they're just like, no, I don't want to watch it. But if you had a one sheet, if you had a trailer, you could be sending out a trailer, getting people excited. If you ended up having a platform and it gave you the tools to make money, but you had to invest your own money into marketing, but you have no money for marketing because you spent it all making the movie, then you're stuck with a product that you spent all this money on, and you have no way to unlock the value out of that product. And I think a lot of people just fail to include marketing in their budget, and that's a big mistake. And so we have to get people educated that you have to include a marketing or publicity budget at the very least into your production budget, so that you can market your film or market your music to get it actually to sell. And so if you had a platform that gave you direct to audience revenue, and you just had to put tokens into the machine to get it to generate revenue that comes back to reimburse you for your expenses, then you probably do it. But these tools don't really exist, and the ones that do, are not well marketed or publicized themselves, and people are afraid of things that they don't know. So there's this gap, and I think over time it's going to change. I think we're seeing it change now. There's going to be a sea change over the next 5 years. And this is really kind of like what Packet's meant to be. So our goal from a marketing standpoint is to start targeting creators, creatives, industry folks, to become part of this conversation, to understand what Packet can offer value, and how these platforms can function and bring more opportunity, bring more money to the creator, and ultimately help fuel the next wave of artists to actually be making money instead of all the money going to the platform. So we have a path to go, but that's the vision, and that's the goal.
Yeah, love it. Cool. All right, well, we're at an hour. It's great chatting with you guys.
Yeah, good
Thanks
chatting with
everybody
y'all
for
too.
tuning in. We'll be here next week, same time, same place. You guys all have a great day.
Yeah.
See you later.
All right,
Cheers.
later, guys.
Bye, Caleb.
Bye.